Hey Wargamers, this is Doug with 2 Plus Stuff, and we're doing a very special While You're Reforging. Now, if you don't know, the last While You're Reforging we did, episode 10, was live, but there was an error on YouTube that kept it from being saved as a video for later, to watch later. And so that was a real bummer, because it spent 2 hours and there's some great dialogue and stuff like that. I can't get that back, but this is special because this is actually the first While You're Reforging that I'm recording on the new computer. Finally bit the bullet, went in there with the support of the patrons and a family friend who is really good at building computers. Ordered this guy up, built him up on Thursday night, and this is my first time really trying to record something of length, so I can get a good kind of measurement of how long it takes to produce things and stuff like that. So, important experiment. Again, experimental, so this might never see the light of day. If it does, cool. So, what I'm going to do is just do one of my normal kind of by myself while you're reforgings. I'm trying to think of how I want to do them in the future. I think I want to have a regular show where it's just me chatting with kind of more concise topics, and then have a live show once a week with everyone asking me questions and just chatting, because that's a lot of fun, but they're kind of different, you know what I mean? Different kinds of conversation, and so I want to have room for both. So what I'm going to do, if you're new to this is a chance for you to paint along with me. So I'm going to point the camera down at my workspace here. Today we're going to be painting up a Herald of Tzeentch on foot. And just paint along with me. We're going to talk about some hobby topics. Today I have some games played that I wanted to share with you. And I did share them in the live recording, but since it didn't get saved, I want to bring them back up because it's two local guys who I really had a great time with, and I think they deserve to have their, their games on the show. So after games played, we're going to talk about speeding up your games. Dramatically speeding up your games, and also kind of my thoughts about getting into Warhammer 40k. I've asked it on the channel, but we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So let me go ahead and turn the camera down and we'll get started. Okay, and we are back. As I said, we're painting up a a Herald of Tzeentch on foot. Guy I got in a great deal from my good friend Brent, friend of the show. So we're going to start off with a base layer of pink horror. And so, yeah, I was going to start this. So, just kind of notes, because I always do hobby progress first, and of course, what I'm doing for the day is, of course, progress. I did the I looked at the GW tutorial for how to do pink horrors, and I hated it. They, in the tutorial, had you do white, wash a Caribou Crimson, go back over and do, like, the more highlights with pink horror, and then kind of build it from there. And I thought that looked super gaudy. Maybe I just did the Caribou Crimson too heavy or not heavy enough. I'm not sure. Didn't like it. So my actual pink horrors don't have that. They actually just have white primer and a wash of Caribou Crimson, and it makes this really nice, very pale pink. And I think that looks absolutely stunning on them. I added a little too much water. But for the leaders, I wanted all the leader kind of pink horror guys to be a little different, and so I'm going to start with pink horror, then give them a wash of Caribou Crimson, so it's a stronger pink, but still has the same kind of tones to it. So that is why we're doing that now. As far as other progress that didn't get mentioned because the last episode didn't save, painted, well, during that show I actually painted up 20 blue horrors, and that was pretty monumental. So I now have 20 blues, 20 brimstones. What else do I got? Yeah, I think that's most of it. The last Path to Glory game before this week was I rolled off and I won 20 brimstones in my army, so that's why that. So yeah, so we're just kind of hammering through them. I had the brimstones out and I was like, well, I have these guys out, I might as well just do the blues. So hammered away at all of them. It was a grind fest. That's why I'm excited to do something simpler, like a hero, right before I move into screamers and stuff like that. So that is pretty much hobby progress, getting you caught up. Really focusing on demons. Few reasons is I just find them very interesting to play. I was doing Slaves to Darkness pretty much exclusively for a while. And the problem with Slaves to Darkness, to me, and this is purely me, and if you disagree, I'm so happy for you that you found something that makes you happy. My thing with Slaves to Darkness is that they don't have a lot of uniqueness on their own. Like, I don't mind that they don't have a lot of shooting. I don't mind that they don't have super crazy spellcasters, although the sorcerer is pretty great. They just don't have a variety of play. It's just a lot of dudes, and if you take certain battalions, they get really good. Which is, you know, it's great that they can shore up weaknesses in other armies, but by themselves, I just don't find them to be a very exciting force to play. And so I got the demons originally to start like adding in like reinforcements, basically. But then I was looking at them and I was like, I have enough to, if I painted them all, to field an army. And I was like, I kind of want to do that just because they can do stuff in the you know, every horror has a gun. You know, all three versions of the horrors have guns, I should say. You got big models like Lord of Change, who was just super cool looking. Magic for days, and I'm really big into unit attrition. I was back when I played War Machine and Hordes. That's like a great way to win that game, is just having so many dudes that your opponent can't chew through them. And so being able to do the, you know, the pinks to the blues to the brimstones, and then if you're using Change Host, throw them all around, swap out different places. Sounds super annoying to play against. I haven't actually tried a Change Host. I actually have everything for it, which I'm building towards. Just not to actually use it, but just as a format, like a building guide, which is what I think battalions, I think that's what they're really good for, is giving you a direction for your collection. Talked about that a little bit with Daughters of Cain. But yeah, so that's what I'm working on. So last night I played some games where the Lord of Change, he was just so good. Like, he just blasting stuff off the table left and right. And he's with my friends, and so they never made me feel bad about it, but I wanted to get a different kind of hero, something a little smaller, just so I can have a little more variety in my choices. Right now, the Lord of Change really is my only HQ option, really speaking. So I want to be able to turn the volume down when I want to, if that makes sense. And right now, as far as painted stuff goes, I really don't. So that is enough for hobby progress. Let's talk about some games played. Now, I did obviously, like I said, play 2 games last night. I want to focus on 2 games that I played last week as well. And so last Thursday, I went out to Let's Play Cafe, a place here in Monroe, Washington, and played with 2 gentlemen, Rick and Max, and had an absolute blast with myself. Basically, the first game was against Rick. He had Stormcast Eternals. And I don't have my book near me. I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head. He had a unit of Retributors, a unit of Raptors, a unit of Judicators, 3 of the birds, Ether Wings. No, that's the battalion. I'm not quite sure what they're called. Birds. You know what I'm talking about. They're only birds in the Stormcast army. And a unit of Liberators, and I think that was it for the a Lord Relictor and a Lord Celestine on foot. That was his leader guys. And this, we drew cards for the open war deck, and then we didn't really think about it until we were already playing, that we weren't playing on a traditional 6x4 table, or even a 4x4, because it was a 1,000-point game. And so we didn't, when we were putting the objectives and stuff down, we didn't account for that, and so when we were looking at the table, turn 2, we realized that if we were going to play for the objectives, we would pretty much all just sit in our corners and hunker down, and that was no fun. So then, turn 2, we were just like, hey, you just want to like mosh pit and kill each other? And we're like, yeah. Yeah, so it's really important to think about those things before you start gaming, especially if you're playing on a non-traditional sized board. But I had a great time. Went in there. He deleted a unit of, and I had 2 units of, well, I guess I didn't cover my list yet. I had Lord of Change, 2 units of Flamers, 3 man each. 10 pink horrors, 10 chaos warriors. What else did I have in there? I think I had more. No, I didn't have much, actually. I didn't have much painted at the time. The very elite type army, very few units, because the chaos warriors were a 10-man squad. Went in there, and the warriors pretty much sacrificed themselves to hold up the Retributors, the big old hammers. They were the only thing I was afraid of, because they could get into the Lord of Change and absolutely ruin his day. since they were able to hold him off, the Pink Horrors came in, MVPs of that game, did the Treason of Tzeentch on the Retributors, and they started punching themselves with their Mega Hammers, did some good rolls with his own attacks, and was able to pretty much destroy that unit in exchange for the Chaos Warriors, which is a great trade, game-wise. And so, yeah, with that, Lord of Change was a little more brave, moved way far forward, got a little... He started shooting me really heavy with the Raptors when they closed in a little bit. So I kind of gambled, and I was like, okay, he's just going to go in, he's just going to make things happen. And so, slammed him forward into the Lord Celestin Relictor. Pink Horrors came on the side, and we were able to basically snatch the game. Wound up killing the Lord Celestin with the Lord of Change in combat, and the Pink Horrors went into the Raptors and tied them up and made their lives miserable. So yeah, I was able to pull out a win on that one. Big takeaway from that game was just that Pink Horrors did far better than I expected them to. That was the first time I've actually fielded them. And so I had like, a theory hammer in my mind of like, these guys should theoretically do this, this, and this. But there's, it's hard to, I'm going to say this, it's hard to quantify a unit that does magic. Because they went far beyond my expectations. And so they are a very versatile unit, and I didn't account for that. Just that they have, obviously magic ability, but also like they can, if you just want them to sit back and do crappy shooting, they can do that. If you want them to, just be chaff, they could do that too. There's cheaper ways to do it, but if you're investing in the blues and the brimstones, like, yeah, they'll be great chaff for a game. And so, yeah, I thought they did really well. I was very impressed with all the horrors and stuff like that. So, yeah, that was mostly it there. And then my second game was a little bit faster, and that was against Max, and he brought a awesome ogre army, just a Grand Alliance Destruction Ogres, and for him, the big theme here was not gameplay. It was that he rolled terrible. His first two turns, I don't like blaming things on dice. He couldn't roll a run or charge roll. Shooting missed on everything. He had like a bunch of those big ogres rocking cannons. Just a lot of variety. He couldn't get a single thing to work, and so by turn two, I was able to pick apart most everything. And so we just kind of made it a fun thing at the end, where it's like his tyrant just bold charged the Lord of Change, got him down to I think 3 wounds left, something very close, very admirable, if you will. He got promptly squashed, and we just called it there. And it was a lot of fun. Because we made it fun. It wasn't a deeply competitive game or anything like that. Sorry if you hear some rumbling, I'm just grabbing a new paint. But yeah, so both of those games were great times against great gentlemen who I enjoy playing very, very much. So I'll look to going back out there. My games... Okay, so in addition to that, because I played 3 games last week, which is unheard of for me, was my Path to Glory game. Now, I'm not going to spoil it here. If you want to see a super fun game of Age of Sigmar, go to the channel Rerolling Ones. You can also, if you go to my channel's homepage right here, I have a lot of their battle reports linked up. I haven't gotten the... I guess by the time I put this up, I'll have it linked up. The one between Slaves to Darkness and Khorne. And that is the one where I played my good friend Jack. And absolutely, I must say, it is the most fun game of Age of Sigmar I've ever played. Where down to the absolute last second, no idea who was going to win. It was just so great. Both of our armies were like depleted and beaten to heck. We played the mission, the Monolith, where this is from the Path to Glory book. One side's basically trying to build a temple to their god, the other one's trying to stop them. And so it just wound up being incredible. Just absolutely incredible. And that's all I'll say about that. So if you want to see a good AOS battle report, you should really subscribe to their channel. Mark is the one who runs the channel. He puts in so much amazing work into his own music and stuff like that. And the models look fantastic and all these kind of beautiful shots of armies. So go subscribe there. You will not regret it. So that was epic. Like I said, I'm not going to spoil it just because I want you to actually go watch it and feel the tension. You know, you're going to be so amped by the end of it, you're going to need to go take a nap, and I understand that. I did too. And in addition to that, I played 2 games last night, which will actually lead me into my next subject. I know this is a lot of games played for me, specifically. The first game was against Jack again, but he tried his son has a small, budding Flesh Eater Courts army. And so his army was really simple. It was 2 of the Ghoul Kings on Terrageists, I think. It wasn't Zombie Dragons. Yeah, it was Terrageists. And then I think 20 ghouls for 1,000 points. Like, it was not much on the table there. Something like that. There were no other heroes. So whatever the difference was is just ghouls. And I really wanted to bust out my demons because we weren't playing Path to Glory where I had to do Slaves to Darkness. So I was like, I want to try these things I've been painting on, and everyone was cool with it. We all know how Tzeentch is. So I busted those out, and we got the open war missions, and it was one where like one side has a big triangle for deployment in the center, the other side has to split between 2 corners on the opposing side of the table. Very interesting deployment style, and I like it. My thought was to split. I won the dice roll to choose who gets what side. So my thought was, if I split his army up, then I can like go one by one and kind of conquer each side. But then I didn't count for the fact that like, well, that means if he stays back and I have to go to him, that means I have to split my army up, and my bonuses for getting more casting and all kinds of stuff like that from Lord of Chain's command ability, those don't work. And immediately after I said, like, yeah, you go ahead and take it, you take the split deployment, I was like, oh, crap. I just cost myself the game right there by giving it to him. His ruse, or no, what is it, the ruse where, like, it's a special ability if you have less wounds, I think is what it's called, was he gets a ambush, so which is basically like everyone gets to move, like I think D3 units in his army get to move a little more before the game starts, so he can kind of be very aggressive. And he took that aggression and moved his entire army like straight up at me. Which on one hand I was like, okay, this is a good thing because I don't have to split up anymore, but it's a bad thing in the sense that like the deployment positions that I put my people down in, that's where they stayed the entire game. Because, you know, the army charged immediately and landed all our charges, and so I was just pinned where I deployed. Excuse me. So, a little worried there. He had first turn, and he didn't roll super hot on his Terrorgeist rider guys, to the point where, like, you know, he ran them straight into a unit of flamers on each side and couldn't get rid of them. And that's just sad when a big guy like that can't clear out flamers with all his attacks. And from there, it kind of went downhill, because once it was my turn, I was able to delete his general on Terrorgeist with spells and shooting. Second turn, deleted the other big guy, and then from there we just called it, because it was just cleaning up ghouls. And I didn't lose a unit, I don't think. I had one guy left and 1 unit of flamers, so that was a quick game. You know, those are the ones that make me feel like super self-conscious about playing Tzeentch Demons, where it's like, that was not a fair game. Or not a full game anyway. It was fair, it wasn't full. But Jack is a outstanding opponent, and he has beaten me so many times that, you know, my feelings are minimal. But let's see what else is there. Start doing a wash on this guy here, get some of the detail in the face. I love the detail in these guys' faces. Second game last night, was against Mark, who played a wonderfully painted Stormcast army. And his army was 2 units of Judicators, a 2-man squad of Concussors, I think they were. The guys riding the little mini Dracoths. Well, they're not mini, they are Dracoths, but Lord Celestin on Dracoth, Lord Relictor. I think that was pretty much it. Right? I think so. And that game was defined by his first turn, because he was asking me, like, hey, do you mind if I bring this? Because it's super cheesy. And of course he's asking that, like, after I just deleted Jack's army in 2 turns. And I was like, you can bring all the cheese you want. I really want you to. Unintentional cheese on my part. I just wanted to play demons because I've been painting him for so long. I'm very leery of playing super competitive things in a friendly environment. But anyway, all that aside. Okay, so theoretically, Mark could have devastated me, like straight up, because he had the lightning breath or whatever from the Lord Celestin and Dracoth. Both the Concussors have a lightning shot. It could have been devastating. He missed with literally every single one of them, like didn't hit the wind, and so that was the fatal shot. He did some good rolls later on, but when he missed, that was his initial chance to like get me before I had a hero phase, and was able to tag him right back. And so that was the defining moment of that game. So then when it was my turn, I promptly did the Treason of Tzeentch on the Concussors. One guy put a bunch of wounds on the one next to him, on his buddy, and through spells and shooting was able to delete the Concussors. He had the Judicators and the unit of Liberators up in the Celestial Realm for their deployment special thing if you're all Stormcast. And the Judicators came down. The Liberators did not come down the entire game. Which is a bummer, which with those kinds of abilities is always the thing that I'm so scared of happening to me. And it happened to poor Mark. So with that list, for both games I had 20 blue horrors, 2 units of flamers, 2 10-man units of pink horrors, and the Lord of Change. And I actually rolled for all of the command abilities with that. I got the Aura of Mutability, so on all their shooting and attacks, if you're within 3 inches of Lord of Change, you get reroll 1s to wound, which is huge for flamers. And I've never chosen that artifact, but seeing what it did, I was like, yeah, that's a thing. That is a thing that will happen from now on, from henceforth. And so, yeah, it was really cool to see that on the tabletop. As far as other stuff goes, the rest of that game was me deleting the Concussors. Then he made the right move and charged his Lord Celestin. He charged it straight into the Lord Change. Used Destiny Dice to eat 2 of those attacks because his command ability weapon thing was making his hammer like even more devastating. So didn't want to eat that many D3 shots, and so absorbed it with Destiny Dice. And then from there, it was just cleaning up Judicators, really, because the Liberators never came down. And so, yeah, I mean, I tabled them, because you get tabled if you have guys that enter the Celestial Realm, and you have to have someone on the table, basically. I think that was turn 3 or 4. I can't remember which one. And here's the thing, like, I had a great game. That's actually why I decided to paint this guy next. I wanted to try something that was a little less, you know, turned up to 11 like a Lord of Change was. I have fantastic friends when it comes to gaming. Mark and Jack and Brent are all awesome guys. It's just, I'm super self-conscious about taking really, really strong stuff because I used to have a Bone Splitters army, if you don't know this. And it was fully painted, which is rare for a Bone Splitters player. And it was a thing of beauty. And I couldn't get people to play a game with me. And the reason was I would go to people and ask, hey, I'll play a game. And they would read about the Cunning Ruck online and how much of a non-game it made for some people. And they just wouldn't even want to try to play. And I said, well, what if I take... Because, I mean, like, if you build that army at all, you're going to have the stuff for a Cunning Ruck. It's just because all the battalions in the army, there's so few units types that if you just buy 2 or 3 of anything, you have a ruck, right? You have a battalion. And so I said, well, what if I take, the models that I have, but I don't actually take the Cunning Ruck battalion? Nope, still broken. Like, okay. And so I couldn't get anyone to game with me, and so I wound up selling that army because I was like, it's not doing what it needs to do, which is give me fun, because nobody wants to play it. At the time, I grabbed them just because I like orcs, and I do still like orcs. I'm still tempted by Iron Jaws every once in a while, to be honest with you. And so that was basically the start and end of the Bone Splitters. And so I get really self-conscious when I do extremely well. Like, I hate games where I give my opponent a non-game, meaning I just trounce them. Part of that was suboptimal Flesh Eater Court's army building. He just played what he had for his kid. And for Mark, it was just poor rolls the first turn. He really could have wrecked me. He could have put that Board of Change in the dirt first turn. But they're really great and encouraging about like, no, like when we're playing fun stuff, just take whatever you want and have a good time. So it's always encouraging when your friends are like affirming of just stuff that you like. They know that I work really hard on these Tzeentch demons, and so they're like, yeah, do it. So that's it for my games played. Epic games played section today. Holy smokes. Okay. Give them a quick second to dry. I'm going to move into my next topic here. Speeding up games. Now, speeding up games is a huge issue right now because if you're not familiar, Las Vegas Open had a few drama hiccups where it was mostly in 40K, but it also affects us because we're so intrinsically related to 40K. That the issue of... I'm sorry, I'm just grabbing a paint here. Slow play has come to the forefront of AOS as well. And if you're not familiar with what it is, some armies take a lot of time. Particularly armies with a lot of models, like an Orc army or a Tzeentch army if they're really focusing on the horrors, pink, blues, and brims. There's a lot of bodies to move. And the problem is that some people, knowing that there is a 2.5 hour cap on their games, will very purposefully play slow so that the game ends and they know they can win. Basically, if they can reach a point where they're ahead in the game and then stall it to the finish line, they are guaranteed victory. And so that is kind of the strategy, quote unquote, so to speak. And so a lot of ideas have been brought forth about how to repair this, including like longer games. But if you go longer, then each game takes so much longer and the day goes longer, and it's just people get already exhausted. You don't want to do that. Yeah, there's actually a plethora of options people have suggested. Chess clocks, stuff like that. Don't know how I feel about that one, but this is not an issue I have as a non-competitive player. And I understand their plight. How about that? I respect the problem. I just have never had it. And so the issue has come up quite a bit of like, how do we deal with this as a community? And so basically what I want to talk about is not so much how to deal with people who are slow playing, but if you are a player who has a large army, who doesn't play fast, who needs time to come up with ideas and strategies and stuff like that, how can you speed up your game in a reasonable way so that, if nothing else, your opponent doesn't accuse you of being a slow player? I think that's, I'm going to assume you don't mean to do something malevolent. So, like, how do we change that? And so, just a few ideas that I had rolling around in my brain. Not all are original to me, but hopefully they help. So, a few things, kind of going off a list here in my mind. The big time saver for me is having dice organized in groups of 5 or 10, depending on what you like to roll, how many you typically roll. And the reason that is, it makes them very, very quick to grab. When you're grabbing dice for, say, saves, you're on your opponent's clock. It's their turn, right? And so you need to be attentive and ready to roll. And so if you have everything grouped in order of 5, you can very, very quickly grab the exact amount of dice you need and get them rolled just right away. Just like boom. And so it makes it very, very quick and efficient. If you are interested at all and you have a horde army and you need assistance moving them, movement trays are a great thing. I don't have them with me right now. I'll loan them to a friend. But Six Bird Studios is going to be a sponsor of the show coming up here pretty soon, and they make fantastic movement trays, which I will show you in a little bit here with a special video about them. But it's the idea of, if you have large horde armies, making them move faster and deploy faster. Deployment's really the big thing. Will speed up your games immensely. And what else? So, what speeds up a game? The biggest thing I have found for speeding up games is declaring intent. And this is something we forget, I think, to do when we're hanging out with our buddies. But if you're going to an event, whether it's narrative, competitive, doesn't matter, declaring intent actually makes the game go faster. So, for example, say you're summoning a unit, it has to be outside 9 inches, right? You put your models down, you measure 9 inches the best you can, and if you tell your opponent, these guys are right at the 9.1 whatever mark, right? You're stating your intent that they're just outside 9. What you just confirmed to them is, hey, if I roll a 9 to charge, they're in. No questions, right? So you're confirming what needs to happen before it ever does, so that if you roll, say, a 9, your opponent doesn't bust out his tape measure and go, are you really just outside 9, right? Because you've already clarified with him on a personal level, this is what I'm intending to do. Same thing with, say, pile-ins. There's been several games on Rerolling One's channel where I have moved my guys up and I said, I can't physically move all 40 Marauders, but we know they have a pile-in of 3 inches and they all have a 1-inch range. So can we talk together and discuss how many are reasonably within range here? And we do, and there we go. And that's all there is to it. So stating intent, inviting your opponent into your mind when it comes to your plan and stuff like that is huge time saver, because it stops the questions and the rules lawyering before they ever begin. Asking your opponent if they're familiar with a rule as you're doing it is important. So let's try to think of a good example. The reality splitting axe of Khorne on the Khorne Lord. So he's going to attack with the Khorne Lord's going to attack your Archaon. And just so you know, we can review it now. If at the end of the phase he's not dead but he took a wound, I can roll to see if he just automatically gets sucked into the warp. And your opponent's going to be like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? You've clarified the ability before it ever comes time to roll for it. And now they're going to keep an eye on whether or not that axe specifically does any wounds to the to the Archaon. So just stuff like that, where you're getting ahead of the situation with the power of communication and inviting your opponent into this social game. And I find that communication is the strongest way to deal with some of this stuff. It's also the thing that we tend to be worst at as gamers. Not that we are inherently introverted and all that kind of stuff. There's all different kinds of people. What I find most often happens is that you have unspoken understandings with your gaming group, but then you go to an event and all of a sudden you don't have that unspoken understanding. So you need to verbalize it. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean anyone's socially inept. It doesn't mean anyone's Asperger's or whatever like that, can't talk to other people. Nothing like that. It just means that we're comfortable in our friends, but we haven't established that with a perfect stranger, and so we need to go out of our way to make that clear for our opponent as a courtesy to them and the judges. And I think communication is definitely the strongest way to clear up a game. Let's see here. So many tentacles in this guy. As far as more ways to speed up, just having your army ready, your information ready. Another big thing is simply knowing your army. If you're going to an event, I don't care if it's narrative or not, I know my Chaos Warriors hit on a 3-up, wound on a 4-up because they're using the hand weapons. I know they have double hand weapons, so it's rerolling ones to hit. That kind of quick information, you know, saves is another big one. Don't waste your opponent's time when they're trying to roll for attacks to look up saves. Just know it. Just do flashcards if you need to. It sounds super dorky to do flashcards for an army, but it's huge. It saves you so much time. And let's see here. Another thing that I think is super important, and this is one that one thing that I tried recently that I never tried before for any game I've ever tried, but I found it to be immensely helpful, was having a reminder sheet, like a cheat sheet. Just, you don't want to use the word cheat too much at a tournament. Just a list of, basically I put hero phase, and I put all the things I need to remember in the hero phase. Command ability, spells, ocular vision if I'm using a chaos sorcerer. Just those kind of random abilities that are easy to forget, that I want to make sure that even if I know what I intend to do with them, I need to verbalize them to my opponent. Again, communication. All those things are super, super important. And so, yeah, I think those are mostly it. Again, the biggest thing is just having information available, knowable, and communicating with your opponent, I think, are definitely going to be the biggest boons. And ultimately, like I said, this is not about dealing with slow players. This is about not being perceived as one. And so if your opponent calls a judge over for slow play, meaning they think you're being abusive to the rules and trying to manipulate the game, I know it's hard in those moments to ask forgiveness and try to understand. I think it's profitable to look at your opponent and be like, why do you think this? You know, because sometimes it's reasonable. If you take a 40-minute deployment, it's a lot of your 2.5-hour game. You know, ask them, why do they think that's going on, and how can you change their mind? And I find that people are very reasonable. We hear these horror stories of people going to events and their opponents are just absolutely unreasonable as people, and I have found that is generally not the case. And so it's just important to kind of keep perspective that maybe you'll get a dud every once in a while as a player, but that's not, it certainly isn't the norm. Okay. So I'm just going to do some Lamia Medium with Colia Green Shade here. Just filling in some of this darkness with Colia Green Shade. So I think those are really, really key things when it comes to this game. Just keeping your opponent in mind and being respectful, and part of it is just being a good, generally human being. And that is it for my speaking of games. I think the dice one and knowing your army are honestly the things that you're going to see the biggest boon from, and they take the least amount of effort. You know, just read your battle tome over and over and over again. Memorize stuff. Get the data cards things if you have access to those for your army. And just work really hard to know what you do. Be able to give an account for everything your army does. And you'll be good. What is next? Let me check my little thing here. Oh yeah, getting into 40K. Perfect timing because I'm talking about demons. So I posted a question on the channel. Let me grab another paint here. Do some golds and start digging into those little brass things. If I can find my gold. I moved into a bigger painting box and still can't even find anything. Come on. Okay, but for real, where is it? Oh, what is this one? Ah, there it is. Okay. Yeah, so on the topic of demons and stuff like that, really looking heavily into 40K. And the reason is simple, because, not because I am in any way losing interest in AOS. This is definitely my primary game, and I foresee that it generally will be. The big impetus for it is just more content, meeting more people. There are a lot of local guys who really love 40K, and they're good friends of mine, so I would love to be able to play them, you know, with games that they're more comfortable with. They're not AOS fans, despite my trying to sway them, and that's totally cool. Fortunately, I have a Demon's Army that can work for both, and I'm happy with that. So, looking at, you know what's really hard, actually? This is actually more of a conversation about getting into new games. 40K is in a weird place right now. I've kept up with it since the new edition came out. I used to play 40K, a little background information. Did play 40K. It's not a completely foreign topic to me. When it first came out with the new edition, played, what are they called? Deathwatch, the all-black guys who hunt aliens and stuff like that. Super elite army. Had a horrible time trying to build lists for them because everything was so elite. Like everything was so expensive points-wise that it was like, trying to build a list. But that's okay. And yeah, and so I got into it for a little while, and then what happened was my local guys who were really into it, I just started getting burnt out. I would go there some nights, and you would just hear people complaining about like the disparity between people who have codexes and people who don't. And after several weeks, I was just tired of hearing the complaining, basically. I was like, well, you know, in AOS, we kind of just have fun. And so, and that's just a different mindset. The local 40K guys here are a little more competitive, a little more, got more teeth to their lists. And it's just, again, if you watch this channel, you know it's not really for me. But they toned it down a lot, basically. They meaning my gaming local guys who play 40K. Kind of eased up on the gas pedal when it comes to competitive stuff, and I've tried to find more ways to just have fun with it, which is, again, I think is the point. So that's been really cool to kind of hear their personal progressions on that matter. Trying different kinds of lists that aren't necessarily the best, but just because they want to try something different to keep the game spicy. And so that to me means it's a good point to jump back in and try it out. Now, what's hard to wrap my head around is how different Tzeentch Demons are from AOS to 40K. I went to my local games workshop and I was talking to the manager there, and I was like, so, like, what are they like? He's like, well, they're basically the same. I mean, it's a lot of magic and shooting. And then I look at how they do magic in 40K, and it's nothing like AOS. Like, the magical damage that I can do in AOS is far outweighs anything you can do in 40K. It's just, I think the game's more about shooting in 40K, and to that end, Pink Horrors have a way better gunline army, and that's kind of their thing. It's a strange gunline. Like, they all have a gun. All Pink Horrors all have a gun. I don't think the little guys do. Pinks and blues. And then the Heralds, like this dude, give them +1 strength. And since their guns are +1 strength... Oh, sorry, their guns are based on their strength, user strength. He makes their guns better. And demons in that game can pretty much just pop up wherever you want them to. Like, you set command points in the beginning, have them basically summon to the board, and then they can shoot whatever's right in front of them. So, get kind of an alpha strikey mega shot in the beginning, which is kind of cool. Yeah, and so I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm not sure how I feel about a gunline army. It's never been my playstyle. I like to really do attrition, kind of grindy stuff, which of course they could still probably do. It's just different. You know what I mean? I think that's all the gold. I don't think I missed anything. These big beads mixed in with gold here, so we'll get those. Actually, I do want to do the little staff parts. Let's do that. Happy little staff. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm debating, because I'm at this point where I'm like, okay, well, I'm certainly willing to try 40K. It's just a matter of like, is this Tzeentchian specifically the kind of army I want to play? It's like, well, it's tough. Let's toss up. I want to try it first. You know, worst I'll do is just waste $12 on codex or whatever like that. If I don't like it, I'll figure something else out. I have a buddy on standby who wants to buy the Tzeentch Demons a second time. He preys upon my inability to keep an army down. So he really wanted the Burning Chariots and Lord of Change and all those kinds of things. So we shall see. Basically, I just want to do something that I have fun with. That's what it comes down to. I just want to have fun. As far as army building, it is so different in 40k that it is it's mind-boggling. Like, I asked this in the chat when we did this conversation during the live show, and I was like, you know, I remember when the last edition of 40k, which I did play with Chaos Space Marines, everyone was getting so tired of their version of battalions. And the reason was, if you don't remember, or weren't around then, in 40k last edition, you didn't pay points for their battalions. You just took the right models and you got it for free, which is a problem for some armies that have really, really good ones, and equally a problem for armies that have no good ones. And so basically what it came down to in the end, toward the end of that edition, was you just saw the same things over and over and over again. And there was very little thought given to balancing them out. Of course, in AOS we pay points for them, which is revolutionary at the time. Of course, we're used to it. But the reason I love battalions so much is kind of twofold. One, they give you a narrative way to play the army. Like, they're intended to be narrative. This is what this guy's force looks like. This is what this detachment of these kinds of warriors would be like. And you're like, oh, okay, so that makes sense to do it thematically. Which, of course, is kind of what I do. Thematic stuff. And then, the other thing is, and this is kind of, I think, understated, is that for new players, it gives you kind of a buying guide. If you just pick a battalion and start investing in stuff, like a well-rounded one that has a lot of different kinds of units, that gives new players a direction. And what 40k is now is so wide open to, like, take whatever you want, that, like, I'm looking at this being like, I have no idea. I have almost 3,000 points of Tzeentch Demons. I don't know what to put in a list because there's so many options. It's just overload. And so that's kind of where I'm sitting right there, in this weird place where I'm like, I have models, I have options, but I have no way, without like doing dozens of hours of playtesting, like what options mean on the tabletop. I wish that I had a direction to go. Like, I wish there were some detachments that were thematic and, you know, army specific, and don't even need special rules. Just give me a format. It would be really helpful for me. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. If you enjoy having those things, tell me in the comments. If you don't, I understand. A lot of people were kind of soured on them towards the end of the last edition, and for good reason. They were insanity. Some of the battalions they had in 40k, I remember, because I still followed that game, were beyond nuts. I'm just doing my last little bits of Colia green shade in here. I don't know if I actually said this on the show, but Colia green shade is my favorite wash. It just looks so dang pretty. And yeah, basically I'm just darkening this up. The box art for the Herald has it going from a very blue to a pink, which kind of gives a really nice purple transition. I want my guys to be a little more grim, a little more dark-ish, and so having them be a little, like, more of a, like I said, the green shade fade is kind of more in keeping with my personal style. But yeah, he's coming along. Honestly, so what I'm going to plan on doing is starting a web series on YouTube for, like, painting tutorials, but specifically for tabletop quality. Like, not... I feel like there's two kinds of tutorials on YouTube right now. There's the guys who do like 3-color minimum tutorials, like here's how you speed paint these armies, which for some is invaluable, like Skaven or Necrons or something like that is super invaluable. And then the other end of the spectrum is like, here's how I spent 400 hours of my life painting this one model, and you're like, I can't fathom. I don't have the attention span for that. And so, what I'd like to do is just do a quick, hey, here's how you get this. Like, here's how you get this model to look really good from 3 feet away, where you're standing up. And I think, I don't know, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. If you think that's something that would be valuable for people, I certainly hope it would be. But yeah, so because that's what I paint at. I don't paint at a high quality. I never have. And frankly, I'm not interested in it. I lose focus way too easily for that. I'm just mixing up some really, really light pink to do my highlights. And that's always kind of been my issue with that, and why I don't do a lot of tutorials and stuff like that. It's because for the longest time I thought that like, oh, no one would want to watch my painting tutorials just because I can't do the kind of quality that you see on YouTube. And a couple of friends were like, yeah, but we don't like the quality that other people do it because it's so high that no one can achieve it. I'm like, oh, that's fair. Okay, so I'm just wrapping him up here a little bit. Yeah, if you were here during the live one, you would have seen me breeze through about 20 blue horrors, and that was good, and they look great. I think they look great. Friends last night said they look great. So yeah. It's just about having something, painted doesn't mean pro, and I think that's kind of been a misnomer. Backing up a little bit, this is sort of a tangent, but it's irrelevant. I hate when I see my friends compare themselves to artists, because here's the thing, like, there's different kinds of painting models, and I've told this to Jack before, where there are people who paint models to play the game, like me. They're hobbyist game model painters, right? They paint models. And then there's people who paint art on 3-dimensional canvases that are also models. And then I think it's important not to confuse the two, because you'll see some folks, you're like, wow, I can never paint like them, and so you stop trying. And it's like, well, no. First of all, like you could paint like them, but secondly, they're not painting to play with these models. Those are like, pieces of art. They're not models to be played with in a game. And so I think it's important that we just not kind of categorize ourselves like that, and so keep ourselves from comparing each other to each other's work. I think that's really important. I think it's a very understated thing. There's no such thing as like the perfect model painter, because everything is really subjective when it comes down to it, as are most things in life. That looks pretty good. So like this guy, and basically I was going to write in the book, touch up some of the tabard, and pretty much be done. I'm going to wash the gold, and it has some details I lost when I painted over it. So I don't know. My biggest thing is, like, this is so much about enjoyment that when I see people comparing themselves to others, it's like, well, why would you do that? This is your escape from the world of comparisons and judgment, I think it's just a shame. What is he standing on? What is he standing on? Looks like a piece of metal. I'm gonna paint like metal. Let's do that. Let's just pick a color and do it. Okay. Lead belcher. Because we are belching lead. And that is really it for my planned topics. There was one more thing I wanted to talk about, and that is Edeneth Deepkin. I was live streaming the day where Edeneth Deepkin were revealed, and man, beautiful models, absolutely breathtaking models. There's been a 3 dozen reviews of like, this is what was revealed, these are my thoughts, so I'm not going to go into that specifically. They look great. I have some gripes. Some of the models, I think that not putting tattoos on the basic lion troop was a mistake because they look too bland, but that's just a studio art thing, not necessarily a model thing. But what I did say in the live chat was like, oh man, I'm so sold by seeing these guys, I want to get an army of them, at least a 1K. And I've actually thought about that quite a bit more. And my plan now is to wait and see how they play. If they are very heavy in the hero phase, I'm going to pass. And the reason for that is, at that point, they don't distinguish themselves enough from my Tzeentch army to be interesting, like gameplay-wise. So that's kind of the biggest thing there. I'm going to... the patrons have supported it to where I can go grab the battle tome and review it. So I'm going to review it and then have a kind of end-of-review discussion about what I'm planning to do. You know, based on what I see in the book, do I want to keep going this far, like, with these guys? Do I want to just stick with Tzeentch? Because, like, when I think about getting another army, I wanted to do something different. Like, an army that's been on my mind a lot lately is Ironjaws. Because they play so utterly differently, and that's awesome. That's, like, fundamentally what I would like, personally, if I'm playing a secondary army. It's having something that does something totally unique. So that's kind of where I landed on that one. Again, not opposed to them at all. Models look fantastic and superb. I'm on the fence with the Shark Riders. That seems to be kind of the point of contention with some people. Like, everyone can agree, like, oh, that turtle looks cool. Like, I haven't heard anyone to be like, turtles, get out of here. What I find is that the Shark Riders are the ones where people start to disagree. And I get it. From what we understand from the lore tidbits, it's like they bring the ocean with them with magic, and so it's like you're underwater when you're near them. It's a very suffocating feeling, which is cool thematically. I think that's awesome, and it would explain, like, you know, flying sharks. I'm like, okay, cool, I'm down. I just want to see the actual models before I get too invested in them. And simply because, like, if they're too slender and, like, narrow, I think that would be a disservice to them. I want them to be a little bit wider, have kind of more of a stance than, say, like the Dark Eldar bikes, which seems to be like their 40k equivalent. So yeah, we'll see about that. Up here in the book room, a little bit heavier. Okay. Alright, well, he's actually just about done. I know it was not a fancy model, but he's not a fancy dude. He's just a herald. I am a little confused because in the, the 40k book, they gave all the different heralds different names, like Fluxmaster, Change Caster, some other strange thing. So it's a little bit jarring when you're trying to figure out what each of the units does, and you're like, I don't know what the heck this is. Basically, you just tell by movement values, because it's the only thing you can really differentiate them on. Let me grab... Where are you? Evil Sun Scarlet. We're going to write in the book here. Okay. And so, whenever I'm doing books, I'm trying not to hold it too close to my chest so you can actually see what I'm doing. I would like to do like one big letter and then a bunch of scribbles, just because if you've seen the old English books, like they do like a drawing or something at the top. So let's see. Just do a random scribble like that, and then we're going to go back with a bad and black and fill in the rest. So grab that. I'm not one of those guys who like writes, you know, there are people who are so good at freehand, they like basically write a fucking essay in there. And it's just like, oh no, I just freehanded it. You're like, you literally wrote the Da Vinci Code inside that guy's book. Shut up. Grab this guy. And yeah, I just usually do like squiggles. Just a little bit, and then break them every once in a while to make it look like there's like different things being said. Yeah, pretty good. I'll take it. Alright, so that is me. Actually see the camera here. So that is him right now. The light that this thing's under right now, it makes the highlights seem more extreme. When you walk into a warmer light, it kind of, the contrast gets lower, and so you can, like, they kind of blend a little better. So that's why if you're looking here on the arm, like, the highlight seems so extreme. It's just this light, and at first I hated it. I was like, oh, I need to get a new light, but it makes it really nice if you already know that fact. Because when you're doing your highlight layers, you can actually see really clearly where you put the highlight down. And then when you move into a regular light, it blends seamlessly, so it's been nice. Yeah, so I got the book there. There's the dude's face. Let me see here. So, yeah, I'm pretty much going to call him done, to be perfectly honest with you. I just, like I said, he's just a low-level hero. Looks good on tabletop quality. Got some shading, got some highlights. Mystical staff, got some gold, some bling. I might do the base black just to match everything else. But this dude is pretty much done. So hey, you know what? Thank you all so much for joining me. If you wouldn't mind heading over to the Patreon and checking it out, we got some cool stuff going on there. Patrons, thank you so much for your support making this computer possible. It already has been a much greater delight to work on. Even just doing the credit reel to give you guys credit, like for patronage, took about 8 seconds compared to the 5 minutes it took on the last computer. So, thank you all so much. And hey, I look forward to seeing you on our next While You're Reforging. I hope to have a video real soon, kind of with a new release schedule, updated with the capabilities of this new computer. So, I look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I want to introduce you to some awesome folks. These are my patrons over on Patreon, and they make this show possible by their direct support of me to buy battle tomes and Black Library books and all the material I need and the hardware support that I need to make this stuff possible. And if you'd like to join them, go ahead and click over to the Patreon page, to the link in the description down below, and you'll be introduced to a really awesome community of people talking about the hobby, sharing what they're painting. I invite them to be a part of polls to decide what content comes next. I raffle off every battle tome that I review, and we're having some great fun and discussions over there. So go ahead and check it out. Now, if you can't support in that way, that's completely fine. I'm just so glad that you watched this video here today. And if you have an Age of Sigmar lore question, go ahead and click subscribe and leave it in the comments down below. I read every single question and comment. I respond to as many as I possibly can, but I use them all as inspiration for future videos. So go ahead and do that now. And I look forward to seeing you guys on my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.